Good morning or afternoon, I guess, depending on where you are in the country, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today for our webinar covering the 2019 hiring insights for the construction sector. I've got about half an hour of information for you, and then there'll be time for questions at the end, as Catherine said. Any questions you have, type them into the chat box, and we'll cover them at the end. So as Catherine said, my name's Jim Fearon. I'm Vice President for Hays in Central and Western Canada. I have 20 years of experience in the recruitment industry, all of it with Hays, with a career focused largely on the construction, mining and oil and gas sectors. I've worked in the UK and Australia before moving to my current role in Canada in 2011. And I feel that exposure has given me, that experience has given me pretty strong exposure to a variety of markets. That's provided me broad experience and insights into how companies handle recruitment, retention and workforce planning across a wide variety of countries and in different provinces, which I think is pretty useful. I'd be happy to share some of it with you at another time if you wanted me to. With me to answer questions at the end, I have Russ Carnley and Bob Bracalenti. Russ is based in our Vancouver office. He's been recruiting in the construction and property sector there since we opened our office in 2004. Whilst Bob has spent 15 years with Hays in our Mississauga office, and likewise he has some excellent experience working in that local market. So welcome to you guys. They'll be online at the end. So before we get started, I wanted to give you some info about the salary guide. This is our 9th annual salary guide, which gives us a lot of data for comparison. This year, more than 4,000 people took the survey, which is in line with previous years, and the report covers 12 industries and functions, so there are insights for most organisations. In the report, you'll find information on competitive compensation and benefits, trends in recruitment and retention, as well as our analysis and recommendations based on today's labour market. In this report, we'll start off with some key findings for the market in Canada and the construction industry. Next, we'll focus on some of the biggest recruitment challenges in the construction industry. And finally, we have some insights to help you compete for local talent. So now we'll look further into business activity and economic outlook for Canada. So 2018 was a strong year for the Canadian economy, and employers expect this to continue into 2019. Nearly half of employers, at 47%, expect the economy to continue to be as strong in 2019 as it was in 2018. And this is great news since Canada has seen booming business activity in this year and expects to enter a strong year again. The industries that are most optimistic about the economy are tech and IT, mining and construction. Not surprisingly, this is flowing into confidence in business activity, with 63% of employers expecting further business increases in 2019. And again, the industries that have seen the most business activity increase in 2018 include property and facilities management, procurement and the legal sector. So many employers stated that they under-forecasted hiring needs this year and ended up having to hire more people than they had anticipated through the latter stages of the year. And this year they're planning to get ahead of the curve in 2019, which is creating some pretty hefty hiring plans. So more than 50% of employers say they plan to increase permanent staff in 2019, and on top of that, 58% say they plan to increase their use of contract staff in 2019 as well. It's also worth noting that slightly less than a quarter of employers increased salaries by more than 3% in 2018. In fact, despite the positive outlook on the economy and ever more positive hiring plans, Canadian employers continue to take a more and more conservative approach to salary increases. On this graph, you can see the last 6 years of data showing the percentage of employers that have offered a salary increase of more than 3%. And you can see that it's dropped every year from just over 40% in 2013 to just over 20% predicted to do so next year. That's a drop of 44%, and means that the vast majority of employers are really just moving salaries at an inflationary level, which does make sense when you take into account things like low interest rates over that period of time, but could have a bit of a health warning attached to it in other ways, as I'll discuss later on. Specifically in construction, you can see a reflection of this trend. So on this graph, the orange bar shows what actual salary increases construction companies gave in 2018, whilst the grey is the prediction for the year ahead. You can see that last year around 25% increased salaries above 3%, whilst the vast majority offered less than 3% increases or had a salary freeze. For 2019, only 21% of employers are going to offer an increase of more than 3%, whilst more than three-quarters will offer less than 3% or hold salaries steady. So again, an inflationary approach to salary increases, but it's important to bear in mind that the construction industry has been extremely buoyant for a long period of time now, notwithstanding market conditions in Alberta. And employers should think about how they use salary increases when considering their retention strategies, as I'll show shortly. We're going into the third year of really strong market confidence where business activity and hiring trends have been increasing, and not surprisingly, that's having a bigger and bigger impact on businesses' ability to function efficiently and on their workforce as talent becomes harder and harder to find. This year, more than 80% of employers are experiencing at least a moderate to extreme skill shortage. How is this impacting business? Well, 60% of employers say it's impacting productivity, and 42% of them say it's impacting competitiveness, which is a serious issue and potentially detrimental to business growth, whilst 30% say it's impacting the bottom line. And what about employees? Well, 73% say it's contributing to workplace stress and pressure, 47% say they're losing efficiency, whilst 44% say it's impacting turnover. Now, to be fair, all of this is pretty bad news, whether you're employer or employee, and the numbers are pretty high. So let's take a quick look at some more specifics for the construction industry. Well, the optimism is flowing into the construction sector and having a big impact on hiring plans. So last year, 47% of construction employers increased permanent headcount, whilst 23% reported a decrease. In 2019, a whopping 52% are predicting to increase, whilst only 10% are predicting a reduction. I'd say that is in part reflected in the Alberta market reaching the bottom of a pretty long fall, albeit recent news isn't so good, so we may see a bit more of a negative impact than that going into 2019. And there's 52% just for the extra impact. That's a pretty big number. Now, having worked for Hayes in the UK and Australia, as I said before moving to Canada, there's generally a very different philosophy around how contractors get used in construction in Canada. I'd say it's way more prevalent in the UK and Australia. But that said, you can see that there's been a pretty significant increase in the use of contractors this year, as there was last year, and employers are predicting to do so more so in 2019 to augment their permanent workforce. And I wonder whether this could be a strategy that, if implemented properly, could have meaningful impact on the skills shortage. When we asked why construction employers are hiring contract workers, the main answers were that they're trying to address productivity concerns and the skills shortage. Specifically, 39% of employers hire contracted workers due to unexpected workload increases, 37% hire them for short-term volume hiring, and 36% of employers hire temporary staff to fill in roles that require specialist skills or expertise. And then we come to the skills in demand, and there's really no surprises here. It's typically the same year in and year out. So estimators, project managers, superintendents, and development managers are the most in demand, which doesn't really leave much that isn't, to be fair. What I can say, though, is the pressure is becoming more intense at the intermediate level rather than at the top level. So companies are feeling more concerned about the strength of their succession plan as many of their baby boomers advance towards retirement age. So the ongoing skill shortage is making it hard for employers to compete for top talent. Here we're going to look at some of the main attraction and retention challenges in this competitive market. So when we look at the biggest recruitment challenges around permanent hiring, we see that too much local competition for talent is the number one recruitment challenge for construction employers. We're functioning in what we call a candidate-driven or candidate-short market, where there are lots of opportunities, and the big challenge for employers is how do you make yourself heard and stand out from the crowd amongst all of the employment or recruitment chatter. Next, 40% say it's being able to compete with salaries and benefits. And then lastly, a lack of access to candidate networks is also a recruitment challenge. And to address this, employers and recruiters need to be proactive and to nurture talent over time. When we asked what are the biggest challenges when hiring contract workers, half of construction employers that use contract workers say the number one challenge is to find the right quality of workers. Now, I'm personally interpreting this is the general fit of the contractor to their organisation, mainly because the next one, also roughly 50%, say that finding the right level of technical skills is a challenge. And then thirdly, 50% again say that the time to hire the right contract workers is a real challenge. So basically, 50% of all construction employers that hire contractors say finding the right person with the right skill set in a time frame that makes sense or makes using contractors rather a viable option is a challenge to doing so. But that also means that half don't have those problems. So there clearly is a way of doing it. I'm going to put in an unashamed plug here, but I think that if you want to get real value out of the use of contractors, then you need to work with someone or an organisation that really understands your business, has a broad network to tap into, as and when you need a specific skill set. And I'd say that working closely with a recruitment partner such as Hays could be an effective way of doing that and alleviate some of the challenges that you face. And if you don't currently use contractors to augment your workforce, then I think it is definitely a very, very real opportunity for you. So what's the main motivator for people to leave a company? Well, put simply, it's money. Job seekers and current employees told us that salary is the main factor, where 30% of the professionals in this industry would consider leaving their current job for a higher salary. It also happens that despite the fact that the vast majority of employers aren't making significant changes to salaries for their existing staff, the vast majority of them will offer a salary outside of their budget to recruit somebody. And this is the health warning I was talking about earlier. So for a number of years, employees have been receiving inflationary pay rises, so they're starting to look for that step up in salary as they progress through their careers. And although employers don't want to increase existing salaries, they will pay more to get someone new. Now, when existing employees find out about the new employees' salaries, which is typically what happens, guess what that increases the chance of. So I think this can be a fairly high-risk strategy if you don't handle it carefully. So what are employers doing to make themselves stand out from the crowd? Well, somewhat ironically, the number one strategy for candidate attraction or for making their company attractive is to offer competitive salary packages, which you obviously have to do to try and get someone from your competition. Next comes promoting company culture and benefits, but where I think more companies are missing an opportunity continues to lie in some key elements that a lot of employees truly value, and that's in career opportunities and personal development. We know from previous studies that we've run, such as our What People Want report, that these are genuinely important to employees and will go some way to offsetting the importance of more money, both from hiring and retention perspectives. So it's worth putting more time and effort into generating a proposition around those two things. Now we'll focus on how to attract and retain talent, given what we know about the top recruitment challenges employers are faced with. So when it comes to compensation, what can you do to better align with market expectations? And you could argue that some of these things are a bit obvious, but actually you'd be surprised how seldom they're done or how often they're not done. My first stop would always be to talk to your employees, ask them what they want. A simple survey sent out company-wide can help you get insights you need so you can prioritise the areas where there is the most dissatisfaction or the biggest push for change. And if you're not already doing exit interviews for your staff, start adding that to the offboarding process so you can find specific areas of improvement. Again, I suggest using all your resources to determine market expectations and candidate priorities. So this salary guide is a good starting point, and our recruitment consultants talk to thousands of candidates, both full-time and contractors, year in, year out in your industry or function, so they really have frontline knowledge of what these skilled professionals are looking for. And then finally, when you're making changes, prioritise those most wanted benefits first. So making a big deal about introducing free snacks, for example, won't help if all your employees really want is time off. So find out what your employees want, find out what the market wants, and then incorporate those into your plans. And you don't have to do big changes all at once. Piecemeal changes over a longer period of time can actually have a very significant impact. So when you're trying to attract the best and brightest, emphasise the career opportunities available. It's the second top reason ambitious people in construction leave their jobs following salaries. Having a career path ready to showcase to potential candidates is a big selling feature and an advantage, and is a very good talking point at interview stages. And I think a lot of employers are put off by the idea of career growth because they think it's about a focus on promotions and salary increases, but think beyond these tired cliches, because that's not what most people are looking for when they talk about career progression. Most people are actually looking for genuine opportunities to learn new things, increase their responsibility, and get exposure to different facets of the business. So to that end, continue focusing on upskilling your staff. You can also introduce programs such as mentorships, job shadowing, doing lunch and learns to make the most of the existing resources in your organisation. This has two benefits. One, you're offering the professional development that people are looking for, and two, you're keeping the knowledge that they have in your organisation and making sure it's getting passed on to your future company leaders. As well, it's important to be up to date and use the latest technology to support your staff in developing new skills and stay relevant in today's rapidly changing economy. Finally, target the candidates you're looking for. Career growth is most important to junior and intermediate candidates, many of whom are Gen Y. So when advertising those types of roles, it's especially important to emphasize career growth opportunities. Another big challenge for employers is a lack of a candidate network. So how can you reach a lot of people with the right experience and interests? Well, social media is the best tool and most obvious tool we have right now for targeting specific audiences. There are going to be three key points here, but they all work together, so you can't really do one without the other. Okay, so number one is build your network. The more followers or connections you have, the greater your reach. Two, then you need to be sharing the right content consistently to keep your audience's interest. So if you want to attract project managers, you can't just share jobs. You also need to be sharing local news, opinions on what's happening in the industry, and project updates, for example, to get them engaged with you. And then lastly, while you're bringing them in with this great information, you can also demonstrate that you're a great place to work. So share company wins, promotions, new starters. So when you have a job opening, people are already interested in your company, they're familiar with it, and have an impression of what it's like to work there. It's also essential to focus on creating a great employee experience. So your employees' observations and perceptions about their employment at your company can also greatly affect how well you attract candidates. Now I'll briefly summarize our salary guide and then show you how you can take action today to start some of these improvements. So to recap, here are key findings from the salary guide. So there's a positive economic outlook for 2019, but salaries remain steady across industries. Less than a quarter of employers expect to increase salaries by more than 3% in 2019. As a consequence, employers risk a high employee churn as candidates are looking for more money. So it's essential to ensure your offer remains competitive by keeping up with changing trends and reviewing compensation. Secondly, there will be a hiring frenzy to make up for previous years where maybe companies didn't hire enough. Canadian employers ended up hiring more people in 2018 than anticipated, so they plan to hire more next year to get ahead of what is expected to be another busy year. When it comes to construction, over half of employers expect to increase headcount in 2019. Thirdly, businesses are losing out on productivity because of the skills shortage. Fortunately, employers are recognizing that hiring temporary workers or contractors can have a direct impact on productivity, and upskilling staff is also significant when it comes to addressing the skills shortage. And finally, AI and machine learning will continue to impact all industries. So in construction, AI and machine learning tools can help efficiently plan, design, construct and manage buildings and infrastructure, and to prevent accidents from occurring. These technologies can also streamline, or additional technologies can also streamline the hiring and onboarding process, so companies can be more effective in their business operations, and employers should start looking at how they can invest in some new technologies now to assess and implement the right solution to see greater returns in the future. So what actions could you take today? Well, obviously you could request your copy of the salary guide to make sure you're paying market rate and get more insights. Assess your current training programs. Where can these be enhanced to support career growth and the development of key skills within your organization? And then thirdly, promote growth and training plans when hiring, and consider building this into your value proposition. So this is obviously just a snippet of our findings. To get even more information and insights, you can request the salary guide from our website there, or from your local recruitment consultant, or you can email myself at jim.fearon@hayes.com, and all of our resources are available to you at hayes.ca/resources. So that's all our core messages for this morning, and I've got about 5 or 10 minutes to answer any questions that you may have, so I'm just going to check the chat box to see if we have anything. And it does appear as though we've got one message coming through. So I've got Russ and Bob obviously with me here to help answer these questions. So I've got one question. We have a bit of an issue with retaining people to the end of the project. We'd like to keep more of our team intact across the full project, but we find we lose people as they start winding down. What can we do to address this? I'll pass it over to Russ. Do you want to answer that question?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Can.
Yep. I'd say what you quite often find is that people who are based on sites outside of the office just feel like they're not necessarily being well informed in terms of what's happening in terms of other pursuits. So I'd say it just boils down to communication, making sure people are aware of what's happening, what work you are bidding on, what's in the pipeline. Obviously, you can't necessarily always say exactly what they're going to be going on to, but I think people just appreciate being kept informed. So getting those site staff into the office, making them feel involved, keeping them abreast of what's happening. Quite often, the inquiries that we get from people, they're just feeling a bit vulnerable, and they are feeling that it's ambiguous in terms of what they're going to be doing next. So then they start looking around at options and sometimes end up moving positions as a consequence. So I think it's a pretty easy thing to respond to and change, but something that we see quite frequently.
So sort of more ongoing and structured communication to teams outside of the main offices. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Good. All right. We've got another one's just come in. So how do I sell training to my senior leadership team when they think it's expensive and we don't have a massive budget for it? So I would say that that's a pretty common sort of response that we get when we talk to people about training and the cost of it. And I think that training programs can be very robust and very expensive, but there's also extremely inexpensive ways to run training programs. And I mean, I mentioned a few of them as I went through the presentation, but we found that an extremely effective way to engage staff and to make them feel that they're being invested in is to give them more access to your subject matter experts internally. We've personally launched mentoring programs across our organisation, right from junior ranks up to senior ranks. We have people getting mentored by individuals in different offices, locations, in different countries even, and it's been a very, very effective way to share knowledge and experience with newer people and to make them feel like they're getting exposure to more senior people in the organisation. We get a lot of buy-in from doing that, and we're making sure that a variety of ideas are being passed down to people as they progress. We do a lot of lunch and learns. We run a lot of internally developed training programs, and they're very simple to do. One of the other important things, and it is worth investing in this, is actually making sure that your managers and leaders know how to coach and train properly. So even if you have the greatest subject matter, if they're not that well versed at coaching, then it can be worth investing some time and money in getting people trained up on that. So that's some easy ideas on how to do it. Personally, I'd say we do that ourselves, and we get some great returns from doing it. Just had another question. We've got 2 questions coming actually. Can we get a copy of the presentation? And the answer to that is yes. It'll be available on our website. Actually, the webinar will be available on our website, and then we can also send you a copy once it gets released. We've got one other question that's come in as well. So as a smaller contractor, it's hard to compete with the bigger firms. How can we differentiate from the bigger names to get really good candidates? And that's a very good question indeed. Bob, do you want to speak to that one? Have you got any insights you'd add?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Jim. A lot of that is, I mean, this is a very common question from SMEs, looking at bigger companies as the more lucrative place for candidates to work. But I think a lot of that is perception versus the reality. To take the side of the small company as opposed to the big ones, not to criticize them. But in a smaller company, you have job security. People often relate that to big, but if you're the most vital member of a small team, you will go through the hard times with that company. And what comes with that is the compensation between small and big. You can be a vital member of a smaller team. So the challenges of not having a bigger package are often leveled out. So as a small company trying to attract candidates, what you can say is, if you're a member of our team, we can carry you through. We'll give you a competitive salary. But the part that larger companies can't offer is exposure to more aspects of a job or a project. Like in a big company, you're often part of a larger team. So you may not take on as big a project with a small company, but you'll be involved sometimes, cradle to grave, which if people are interested in career development, that's a huge career advancement tool, to be able to be exposed to a bunch of things. And another thing, not to self-promote, but allying yourself with a recruiter who properly represents your company to the market is good. Or when you're interviewing candidates, to take the extra time at the start of the interview to explain to them the benefits of your company and the culture. Candidates do talk to other people in the industry about their interview experience, whether they get the job or not. So I'm a big fan of the SMEs. So I think it's just about changing the perception of opportunity.
Yeah, I think you could add to that. There's a general sort of rule: just because you're a smaller organisation doesn't mean you can't run yourself in the way that a larger organisation does run themselves. And to Bob's point there, it can almost be easier to demonstrate the opportunity for progression in a smaller organisation than you can in a larger organisation, where it's easy to just get lost amongst, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of employees. So I think you need to really look at what are the strengths that a small organisation offers, and how do you turn that into an employer value proposition in a really meaningful way. And there is a meaningful way to do it. So Bob's got some excellent points there. So another question's just come in. What is your outlook for Alberta, given oil and gas is landlocked? In addition, when the UCP comes to power, will they open the books and say the province is broke? Heavens. Yeah, it's so having, I live in Calgary, for those if I didn't say that at the beginning, and this year's been a bit bittersweet. I think it's been, we really felt the hardening of the sort of the market as we came through sort of the second half. And not to say it was significant, but we really felt that we'd hit the bottom, and jobs were being created, and industry was starting to move on. The recent news around pipelines has really rocked the industry. The oil price differential is in a horrendous place, and the oil companies are looking very bleakly at the future at the moment. Some are saying if we don't get 2 pipelines built, then the industry's done, let alone 1. So it's not looking great, I'd say. I don't necessarily think that we're going to see a dip in 2019, simply because there's not really that far to dip. And I do feel that there's been enough diversification of the economy through 2016, 17, and the last part of 18, where there's been other industries investing in Alberta. for those of you that don't know, the vacancy rate downtown is peaked above 30%, so there's a lot of very cheap property available for companies that are interested in moving here. So there's some reasons to be positive about it. I mean, what happens when the UCP comes to power? Yeah, the books are going to look fairly bleak, I have to say. We're not making much money off the oil sector, and unless we get pipelines built, we're going to continue not making much more money out of the oil sector. So it looks very challenging. I'm not a politician. I don't profess to understand politics that well, if I could be completely honest. But I don't suspect that the books look brilliant at the moment. So maybe we will be broke, I don't know. But it's an interesting one, and I'd say we're all holding on by the seat of our pants in Alberta to see what's going to happen next year. But yeah, there we go. Sorry if I can't give you a better answer than that. We've got no other questions. Thanks for that one. That was a good one. So as I said, thank you very much for dialing in. If there is more information you want, if you'd like to sit down and talk to anyone from our organisation around the findings, if you want to pick up our brains about getting more detail around how we think companies should structure their organisations to deal with the challenges they face around the skill shortages, hiring trends, hiring challenges, retention trends and challenges, then we're always happy to do that. We don't, require that you're a client of ours to come and provide our insights and knowledge. We feel we have many years of experience working in this industry, and that we do have some insights that you can't get from spending your day-to-day doing construction. So please feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to come and meet with you and to answer any questions that you may have. But anyway, my email address is there. As I said, you can request a copy of the guide by emailing me or getting it offline, and this webinar will be posted on our website shortly today or tomorrow. So thank you very much for dialing in, everyone. I hope you have a very good rest of your Tuesday, and we look forward to speaking to you again in the near future. Thanks. Bye.